Hello everyone, this is Venom, and today I want to go over the Prismatic Hunter. I want to go over my initial thoughts on it, how I've been kind of playing it, and what to kind of expect as far as build videos in the future. Now, before we continue, obviously the Prismatic subclass has come out with the final shape. When I'm talking about the final shape and talking about the seasons, I want to make sure that I'm keeping some things clear. I'm keeping all these things separate. So when I'm talking about the seasonal content or the episodic content that's currently out, which is Echoes, that is separate from the DLC. That is separate from the expansion, which is of course the final shape. And of course it's technically coming out with the final shape, but I'm also going to keep that separate from the subclass. I say that because I'm judging all these things kind of as their own separate entity. Now that being said, today we're going to talk about the Prismatic Hunter. This is definitely by far the class I've been playing the most since Final Shape came out, and I want to talk about all three parts of it. Now, what I mean by three parts? Well, to me, Prismatic comes in three parts. The first off is the actual subclass itself, the actual Prismatic subclass we get during the final shape. The second portion of it is the exotic class items that we can unlock during the Dual Destiny mission. Now, the third part I want to talk about, and the third part I consider being part of Prismatic, is the Ergosum Sword. And I say that because it kind of fits in with the theme that the Prismatic subclass and that the exotic class items have, and that is taking effects from other weapons and putting them onto this weapon, the Ergosum. And of course, the Ergosum Sword has 8 different effects you can get from different exotics that exist already. And on top of that, it is a special ammo sword. So to me, this goes hand in hand with Prismatic. I mean, this might as well just be the Prismatic weapon. Now, I'm saying that this is the Prismatic weapon because if you guys are seeing how many kills I've got with this has hands down been the weapon I've used the most in the final shape. You see, it's only been a few weeks. I've got over 16,000 kills with this thing. Now, this is a very specific role. This is the Arc Conductor role. If you don't have this role, I highly suggest you go through and you farm Overthrow until you get this. The frame, just use whatever you want. Personally, I like the lightweight frame because I play a hunter and I like that lightweight playstyle. It kind of feels like my class sword. I got lucky and got this one on my second try. But as you can see, I've got over 16,000 kills on this one. I think the original one I had was the heavy frame version of it, and I already had like 2,000 kills or so on it before I got this one. I traded it out, so as you can see, I've got a lot of kills on here. Again, the Arc Conductor is just amazing. It basically kills ads for you. I really love this one. This I've been using on Prismatic, no matter which one of the three classes I'm using, Warlock, Titan, or Hunter. I've always got this particular sword on. So that being said, I do want to make sure that you guys understand this is where I've got most of my kills on weapon-wise. I have used a lot of other weapons. I've been using a lot of machine guns and my scout rifle, my hung jury as my main weapons, or other than the sword, but the sword has been my main go-to. Now, currently, I am still hunting for some better class items, but currently I'm using one with Shards of Galanor and Spirit of Coyote on it, and I've also got another one with Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of Gerfalcon. So these two are my best rolls so far. I'm trying to get one with Galanor and Star Eater on it. That is the ultimate roll I want to get, but as of right now, these two are going pretty good. So, that being said, those are the two parts of Prismatic that are the easy ones to go over. I want to go over my impressions of the Hunter subclass overall. Now, first off, I'm going to go ahead and get the bad stuff out of the way, and there's really only one bad thing and one thing I'm neutral on as far as the subclass goes. The bad thing is hands down the Hellfire Spike Grenade. Unfortunately, out of all three grenades, the Hunter definitely got the worst of the worst as far as the grenades goes. Now, this is a spike grenade, and it basically does damage in a cone, which means that if you don't aim this grenade in the right way to hit a group of enemies, it's not going to do much. You can't just toss this in a group of enemies and it's going to hit all of them. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Now, this does stick to enemies. You can attach this to bosses and to other enemies, and this will stick to them and do damage to them. And it will damage anything that walks into the cone. But unfortunately, this is very unwieldy to use. Now, there are some times where you can toss it down in the right spot and just do some really good AoE damage. You really lock down an area, but the Hellfire Spike, the Hellfire Spike definitely pales in comparison to the Warlock and the Titan grenades. Now, we're going to go into our abilities and our melees, and then we're going to talk about our aspects. Now, as far as our grenades, we got some pretty good grenades for the Hunter. The grapple grenade, I feel like, this is the best class to have it. It would probably feel weird if the Titan or if the Warlock got the grapple. I'm glad the Hunter got it. It definitely feels like the Hunter should be the one to get that of anybody. I like the Duskfield grenade as well. This also works pretty good with our exotics, the Renewal Grass, so I'm glad we were able to get our hands on that one. The others, I don't really care too much about. If I want to just make sure I'm proccing my Style Executioner, I'll use my Swarm Grenade. After that, the Magnetic Grenade and the Arc Bolt Grenade, I don't really care about them. I rarely use them unless I have to get some unless I got to get something done on Pathfinder that requires getting Void or Arc kills. For the most part, I'm either using Grapple, I'm using the Swarm, or I'm using the Dust build. 99% of the time, I'm using the Grapple Grenade. Now, for the melees, for the Strand and for the Stasis, obviously, they only have the one. I have pretty much used Withering Blade or Threaded Spike for my melees the entire time. I have used my, again, Snare Bomb. I use it every once in a while. It does do more damage now. I use it a bit. It's the only real Void ability there is, except for the Smoke Grenades that makes you invisible, but you need a certain aspect to do that, and we don't have that on the Prismatic Hunter, unfortunately. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Now, as far as the Knife Trick, this is not one that I would have chosen for Prismatic. Now, again, I understand that you can't put everything great on Prismatic, or there'd be no reason to play those other subclasses, but I do want to mention just kind of, if there was an improvement I would make on each class as we go, I kind of mention what that improvement would be. Now, for the Cellular Knife, I definitely would have used Proximity Knife instead of a Knife Trick. I don't like it. You gotta be pretty close for Knife Trick to really get some good damage off. It can kill some weaker adds, but I don't like this one. It's not quite as consistent as something like Proximity Knife is. It does good damage. Knife Trick is more like a shotgun. You gotta be pretty up close, and that's not something I want to do with a throwing knife. Granted, yes, it is a melee ability, but this is one that, for Hunters, is typically a range ability. I definitely would have preferred having the Proximity Knife. And as far as the Combination Blow for Arc, I mean, this is probably the best Arc melee there is. Hunter's got a really crazy combination they can do with Combination Blow, so if you like that playstyle, this works for it. And then, yeah, like I said, I'm just happy that the grapple's on here. I have definitely probably used this one more than any other grenade by far. I like it because it helps with the Hunter's movement for Prismatic, especially since Hunters, even though they're supposed to be the mobility class, typically have less mobility options than Titans and Warlocks. Even though we have the highest mobility in the game, supposedly, Warlocks and Titans typically are able to outmaneuver us, so having that extra grapple on there definitely comes in handy. And Withering Blade has definitely been the melee I've used the absolute most in Prismatic. It works with a lot of the aspects, but it also works just because you get 2 charges of it. They both will proc Stylus Executioner, and if you have both charges, you can hit both on an enemy, and that enemy will freeze if they are not dead. Now, the Threaded Spike is a good one too. If you've got a lot of enemies, you can oftentimes get your entire melee back. However, it's not quite as consistent as the Withering Blade is. I'd much rather use that most of the time. And it's also got that added, oh shit, I can freeze an enemy if I need to bonus. So, Threaded Spike is good, but I definitely prefer having the Withering Blade over it. Now, as far as our movements, we got all of our movement ability. We got the triple jump, the double jump, we've got the high jump, and we've got the blink. Of course, you use triple jump. I mean, the only thing you're really ever going to use besides triple jump on a hunter is going to be blink, and even then, that's not one I like to use a lot. So triple jump is obviously going to be the one to go with. And I typically have on Gambler's Dodge to help me get my melee back. Now, you can put on Marksman's Dodge. I do typically put that on for like boss DPS phases. I rarely ever use Acrobatics Dodge unless I have to make everybody radiant. Typically, I've got somebody else doing that. But there are also other ways to make myself radiant, especially in the fragments, which are universal for everybody. So I typically stick to my Gambler's Dodge or my Marksman's Dodge. Now, finally, let's talk about the aspects. That's where Prismatic really kind of shines. And I'm going to be honest, most of the builds I've done so far have evolved around Stylus Executioner. Now, every class, you can use any combination of these aspects you want, but every class I feel like has got one ability that kind of you build around. And definitely for Hunter, I feel like Stylus Executioner is the aspect you build around. I mean, we don't have as great as healing as, say Warlocks do. We don't have the great defenses that the Titans do, but we can turn invisible, and that's where Stylus Executioner comes in handy. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the same invisibility options as we do on the Pure Void subclass, particularly the Vanishing Step and the Trapper's Ambush. Now, these two are 2 very important skills because they let you turn invisible without needing to get a kill. Vanishing Step makes your dodge turn you invisible, and the Trapper's Ambush actually turns your smoke grenade into a grenade that turns you invisible. We don't have either one of these on Prismatic. Now, Stylus Executioner definitely has its purpose. It is great for at-level content and for raids. It's just not going to take over the Grandmaster build, and that's okay. It doesn't have to either. Not everything has to be for Grandmasters. Not everything has to be for all content. So this is not one I've been using for Grandmasters. I will be using for it. I'm still sticking to my usual Omniaculus build, but this is one that's been very fun, especially in the raids. Now, I've also been using the Winter Shroud, which is what you start with, and honestly, I've been liking this just because if I've got no other way to turn invisible, if I got no other way to debuff my enemies, the Winter Shroud will debuff them for me, and then I can get that kill and turn invisible. On top of that, if it's like an oh shit situation, I can turn in, or I can dodge, put out that Winter Shroud AoE to slow targets, and then hit them with one more Withering Blade, and that will freeze them as well. It works really well with the melee that I've chosen. Now, I've used all the other aspects as well. I will say this, the most fun one to use has definitely been Ascension. I'm not an Arc guy. I will be the first one to tell you, the only time I like using Arc has been using it on Warlock. I don't like Arc. It's not that it's terrible. I just don't like that playstyle. Void is hands down my favorite playstyle. Followed up probably by Strand, then Solar, then maybe Stasis, and then finally it would be Arc. I like them all, but something's got to come in last, and Arc just happens to be that. But Ascension is actually pretty fun. And I did complain earlier about Hunters not having as many mobility options as the Warlocks and Titans do. Ascension gives us one more vertical option, because you can use this after your triple jump. I've tested it out. It gives you a little bit more height. It works with the grapple grenade, so this setup actually gives us a bit more movement. So if you're doing jumping puzzles and you've got on Prismatic, tossing on Ascension and the grapple grenade will actually help you out quite a bit. So this is one that will jolt enemies around you. There are a few builds I've used for this one, so I've actually had more fun using Ascension on the actual pure Arc subclass. Using a combination of Ascension, Flow State, and the Spark of Beacons fragment will actually make your Ergo Sum Sword with Arc Conductor on it. It will actually cause any enemies you hit with it, if you're amplified, to be blinded. So this is actually being pretty fun. You basically just use your Ascension, you kill any enemies that got jolted, and then activate your Arc Conductor. Basically, as you walk by enemies or as they get close to you, it's going to hit them, it's going to arc to them, and it's going to blind them. It's been really, really fun to use. So that's a really cool combination I've been using. Now, as far as Gunpowder Gamble, that is definitely one you're going to want to pair with either the Withering Blade or the Threaded Spike, because you're basically going to proc that in one hit if you've got a lot of enemies around you. It's been very fun to use. I have used it a couple times. If I need to get any kind of solar kills, I just need a little bit of extra ad clear. I am using this one. I'll probably take off the Winter Shroud for it. I basically use Style Substitutioner with everything, though. I pretty much keep that on at all times as my oh shit button. Now, granted, again, you got to get a kill to activate it with a elemental debuff, but it's pretty easy to get an elemental debuff with this. So I've been using that one for everything. Now, finally, we've got the Threaded Spectre. I've basically been trying to use this one instead of Shade Step to take its place. Now, this is supposed to get enemies to attack the colonially behind. It does take a couple seconds for them to stop and attack it, which it does the same thing when you're using a Shade Step. It takes a minute or a couple seconds for the enemies to disengage from you because you're invisible. So, essentially, it's the same thing, but I found as far as utility, I've liked Winter Shroud a lot, or Winter Shroud. Sorry, I really can't talk today. A lot more. I want to test this out a little bit more. Maybe it's just a little bit biased because I've been using Winter Shroud longer. I used Threaded Spectre for a couple days and I just really miss having Winter Shroud. So I want to go ahead and test it out a little bit more. But I am definitely thinking Winter Shroud personally over Threaded Spectre, just because I can easily freeze enemies if I'm really that dire. If I can't easily turn invisible by a Withering Blade melee, then I need to be able to go ahead and freeze enemy. If I can't get that one-hit kill with this melee, that means I'm probably fighting a boss or something that's bigger. I need to go ahead and freeze a thing. Now, again, Threaded Spectre can help, but I may not be able to go ahead and take that next hit. So I can freeze an enemy quicker than I can get something to disengage with Threaded Spectre. So, again, we're getting into details at that point that may not matter to everybody, but that's just where my mindset is as far as this aspect. So the question is, how is the Prismatic Hunter overall? To be honest, I love the kit. There are definitely a couple aspects that I wish we had instead. Now, Bungie's gone ahead and said they're going to be adding in additional aspects later on. If they're choosing from aspects that already exist, my suggestions would be definitely for Void, I would go Vanishing Step as a strong first, and if not, Trapper's Ambush. But unless you're going to give us the Omniaculous effect on an exotic class item, then I would definitely prefer having Vanishing Step. That dodging and turning invisible is just too good. It's almost muscle memory. Even in Prismatic, sometimes I'll be in trouble and I'll try to dodge, think I'm going to turn invisible, and it just doesn't work. And I'll forget I've got to dodge and I got to use that melee right afterwards, which I should be getting back thanks to Gambler's Dodge to go ahead and freeze the enemy or turn invisible. But the Vanishing Step is definitely the one I would pick for Void. If I had to choose one for Arc, it would definitely be Flow State. It's very hard to just make sure you activate Amplified at the drop of a hat, and this allows you to do so. This also plays into the combination I mentioned earlier about turning your Arc Conductor into basically a blinding sword. I mean, that plays into it. However, unless we've also got access to the Spark of Beacons, then that's not going to work. But Flow State by itself is already pretty dang good. Now, I don't necessarily like Tempest Strike, and I don't really like Lethal Current. But if I had to choose one, if we didn't have Flow State, And if we didn't have access to the Spark of Beacons, which we probably wouldn't, then I would say instead go ahead and give us Lethal Current. And this is one that's going to be great with melees as well. It says after dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. Damaging any jolted target with melee also blinds them. I think we'd see even crazier melee builds using Lethal Current. But like I said, if we had access to Flow State along with Spark of Beacons or something comparable, then I would kill that instead. Alright, for Solar, knock him down. Easily knock him down. This will play right into getting our melee back. Now, the only downside is that we would be stuck using the knife trick. Or actually, now that I think about it, we probably wouldn't be. It'd probably just work with any melee. So, yeah, I would say knock him down, and then whenever I got a melee kill, I'll be able to easily get that right back. I think that'd be perfect. Just knock him down as it is, just tweak it to work with Prismatic. I think that would be an amazing... In fact, I wish we had that one instead of Gunpowder Gamble. I think, now don't get me wrong, I think that probably would have made the Hunter too cheap, although I still hope we get it anyway, but knock him down would be the aspect I use, because while we're Radiant, we're going to get our melee back, and we do have fragments that give us Radiance when we get melee damage. Don't even got to get a kill. We do have a fragment that gives us Radiance when we get a melee, when we do melee damage. So knock him down would be the next Solar aspect I'd like to see added for the Hunter. For Strand, I'm split on this one. For damage, I'd say Whirling Maelstrom would be the way to go. It is an excellent ability. I know everybody loves it as far as damage and ad clear goes. But as far as actually feeling like I'm using Strand, I'd like Widow's Silk. So I'm really kind of torn between this one. Now, Widow's Silk would likely work with any grenade, so it would just give us a second grenade charge, which would be amazing for Hunter, and this is one that I really like. However, for overall damage and just feeling like we're doing something crazy, giving us back something that is kind of the Hunter identity, or one of the Hunter identities in Strand, I would definitely say Whirling Maelstrom. Now, you guys may hate me because I know a lot of people like Whirling Maelstrom over Widow's Silk, but I would definitely take Widow's Silk just because I want that second grenade. And I would definitely be using it with the grapple grenade. So, you may hate me for that one. I would definitely want to use that one just because it's more fun, but if I had to choose one to actually help out everybody, that everybody would love, go with the consensus, it would probably be the Whirling Maelstrom. Alright, finally, and for Stasis. If I'm being honest, any of these would work. However, in order, I would probably choose Touch of Winter, because we do have access to the Renewal Grasp and the Duskfield Grenade, so this would be the third part of it we needed. I'd say Touch of Winter. After that, I would say Shatter Dive, and then third up, I'd say Grim Harvest. I want Touch of Winter just because it would give that Duskfield Grenade additional functionality, making it bigger, which is one of the really good things you can use with Stasis with Hunters. Second up, I would say Shatter Dive, just because Shatter Dive is definitely a Hunter specialty. A lot of people have PTSD from this move, so that would definitely be one I'd like to bring back for it. And then lastly, Grim Harvest. I mean, we get enough shards as it is, so I'm not really overly worried about it. So I'd say definitely either Touch of Winter or Shatter Dive. I'm leaning a bit more towards Touch of Winter. So, like I said, overall, I definitely think the Hunter kit is probably an 8 out of 10. Like I said, there are some things I would definitely tweak on it. There are some exotic effects I'd also like to see on there that aren't necessarily on there already. Balance of Powers 1. Granted, it is a new exotic, but we do have the Threaded Spectre aspect for Prismatic, so that will go hand in hand with it. The Mask of Backrest, I think would be really cool to see. Basically turn our dodge into a shift, and I think that would work really good with the Gambler's Dodge. This is one that typically only work with Stasis. I think making this work with any subclass would be a really good thing to do. It gives your dodge a longer range, and it gives you additional stasis and arc damage to weapons, so I think this would be a great one to add as an exotic class item effect. And then finally, I mentioned this one before in my videos, kind of going over the effects I'd like to see. I would still like to see the Aeons added for everybody. So Aeons is one I'd like to see on everybody's class item. I'd like that to be an option for us. That way we could generate ammo for everybody, but I know that one may not happen, but that'd be one I'd like to see added. So that is going to do it for today, everybody. That was my overall thoughts on the Hunter Prismatic subclass. Again, I give it an 8 out of 10. There are a couple things I'd change on it. Like I said, I definitely think giving us a way to turn invisible without getting a kill is probably the biggest downside I see to this. A lot of the Hunter kit, a lot of those effects kind of work together very, very strongly, even more than the other subclasses. But having some way to turn invisible without getting a kill, I think, is the biggest downside to it. That's going to do for today. Thank you all for coming by. Please like the video if you like what I talked about today. Let me know what you think about the Hunter Prismatic subclass down below. Please sub to the channel if you love what we're doing, and I will see you all in the next video.